And you're live, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to this Performance Governance and Audit Committee on Monday the 25th of March 2021. Sorry, on Thursday the 25th of March 2021. My name is Councillor Jeanette Stilts and I am the chairman of this committee. This committee meeting is held under new regulations which come into effect on the 4th of April in response to the COVID-19 situation. And there are just a few housekeeping issues to run through. First of all, please could you ask everyone present in the meeting to ensure your microphone remains muted when not addressing the committee. This will reduce background noise and avoid any unintentional disturbances. This meeting is being hosted remotely, streamed live and recorded. And by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. Members and officers during each item, please use the hands up function of the meeting to indicate you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Members, you are reminded that apart from indicating points of order or that you have to leave the meeting, the chat function should not be used for questions or any other purpose. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please ensure you reference a page or paragraph number and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. When invited to speak, please ensure that you turn your microphone and video on. Now, if I may ask officers taking part in the meeting to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Dobson.
Good afternoon, members. Paul Dodson, Director of Strategy, Performance and Governance.
Good afternoon. Miss Donnelly.
Good afternoon, Emma Donnelly, BDO Internal Audit Manager.
Good afternoon. Miss Hughes.
Good afternoon, Cheryl Hughes, Programmes, Performance and Governance Manager.
Good afternoon. Mr. Leslie.
Good afternoon, Chris Leslie, Director of Resources.
Good afternoon. Miss Sweetley.
Good afternoon, Hannah Wheatley, I'm the Specialist Services Manager.
Good afternoon. Mr. Wisdom.
Good afternoon, Craig Wisdom from Deloitte, External Audit.
Good afternoon. Berna.
Good afternoon, members. Berna Casey, Clerk to this afternoon's committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Berna. Any other officers present? I think we're supposed to have Azaria.
I thought I saw her logging in, Chairman, but I do know that Mr. Wisdom is presenting their report, so maybe she has left the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Berna. Could I ask if there's any other councillors that are in attendance before we go to the roll call of committee members?
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Morris is here, lurking, and I've pressed down so that Councillor Jarvis can look extra dashing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Berna, can you now carry out the roll call of the committee members, please, to confirm who's in attendance?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I will call your names in alphabetical order. Can you please indicate you're in attendance, starting with Councillor Channa?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm here present. Thank you.
Councillor Hurd.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Hull.
Oh, good afternoon. Yes, I'm present.
Councillor Jarvis.
Good afternoon, Berna, Chairman, members.
Thank you. Councillor Keys. Councillor Keys. Councillor Nunn.
Yes, hello, Berna. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Shaughnessy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Present, Berna. Thank you.
Councillor Stamp.
Good afternoon, Berna, members, officers. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Stilts.
Good afternoon. I am present.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Apologies for absence. Can I have any apologies for absence, Berna, please?
Yes, Chairman, we've received apologies from Councillor Helm.
Thank you. Item 3 on your agenda is the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of February 2021, found on pages 5 to 10. Sorry. Well, found on pages 5 to 10. Can we say that these are true and an accurate record? Councillor Hurd.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, page 8, please. Halfway down, the last bullet point it says conversation 80 businesses. I presume that's meant to be conversations with 80 businesses.
Page
yes, Councillor Hurd, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, and page 10 is blank. I so move. If you wish to second those minutes, please unmute your microphone and state your name.
Seconded, Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Councillor Shaughnessy. Can we take these by assent, councillors?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Happy.
Thank you.
Subject to my comments, Chairman.
Yes, of course.
Subject to your amendment, yes.
Thank you.
Item 4, declarations of interest. To disclose the existence of any nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items of business on the agenda. Having regards to paragraph 6 to 8, inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are required that they are also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware should the need arise throughout the meeting. If any member has an interest to declare, please use the hands up function now to indicate and I will invite you to speak. Councillor Channer.
Thank you, Chairman. Non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council, and any matter that pertains to that on the reports, and certainly is mentioned about the flooding issue that Essex is referred to in that, Chairman, and other areas. So I'm declaring the non-pecuniary in relation to that, in regard to that relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Channer. Are there any other declarations of interest, Berna?
No, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 5, public participation. Is there any members of the public that have indicated they wish to speak under the public participation, Berna?
No, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 6 on the agenda is the external audit fees. I call upon Mr. Leslie, Director of Resources, to give us an update.
Thank you, Chairman. A briefing was circulated to all committee members on the 19th of March, which provided an update on the audit fees. This followed a meeting with the Chairman, Vice Chairman and I with the PSAA on the 16th of March. I'll now provide a summary of some of the key points from that briefing. So following discussions with the external auditors, the fee proposal, which was nearly £100,000 to begin with, has been reduced to 88,500. However, 6,000 of that reduction relates to the delay in the implementation of a new accounting standard, and that charge will be required again the following year when that accounting standard comes into force. There was also the allocation of £15 million grant from central government in respect of the increase in audit fees. Just to report back that we have had no further update on the allocations yet, but we did have a very crude estimate based on population and estimated it could be around £12,000 to grant to offset some of that cost, but that's a very crude estimation. Just to provide some feedback from the meeting with the PSAA, they did recognise the significant changes to the audit market that has taken place and that the original scale fees would need to increase. They will be conducting independent research to ascertain what resembles a reasonable fee variation in their view. The PSAA have not yet looked at the 2021 audit fees. We did put across our concerns, of course, around those fee levels, but to date, they are not considering those. In terms of the process for approving the fees, once the audit is completed, likely towards the end of this calendar year, the fee proposals will be submitted by the external auditors to the PSAA when they will have a look and review that. Part of that process will include them asking questions of the external auditors around the fee variations, asking for further evidence and explanations where required, and if felt necessary, they will indeed look at audit files as well. And finally, they will of course speak to the council again to hear our views before they make the final decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Does anybody have any questions on that? No, I will move on then. Thank you very much, Mr. Leslie. Item 7 on the agenda is the internal audit report. Follow-up recommendations on payroll, and these are found on pages 11 to 36. I call on Miss Donnelly to present 3 reports. Thank you, Miss Donnelly.
Yes, good afternoon, members. So if we start with page 13 and the progress report, this is to summarise how we've progressed against the audit plan for this year. Since the last committee, we've finalised one audit report, which is the payroll report, which I'll talk through in a minute. We have one audit underway, which is knowledge management. And we have 2 audits in the planning stage, which are housing needs and affordable housing and management of property. And we've begun planning for next year. Obviously, we brought the annual plan to the last committee for approval. It's now been approved, and we've begun the planning stage for that. So we can report back on that in the next meeting. And we're also on track to deliver our annual report and head of internal audit opinion, which we'll be bringing to the next committee as well. Any questions on the progress report?
No.
I'll move on to the follow-up report, which starts on page 18. There's one recommendation which has been implemented relating to flood risk management, and that was just around bolstering the knowledge within the council on flooding risk, which has been implemented. There's one overdue recommendation for building control, which we didn't receive an update on at the time of follow-up, but I believe officers might have an update to provide at this stage. And then there are a number of other recommendations which you'll note in the table for flooding, safeguarding and information management, which are not yet due. So when they fall due, I'll bring an update on those to the appropriate committee. Any questions, or is there an update on the building control recommendation?
I've got 2 hands up, so...
Chairman, Ms. Wheatley is going to provide an update for us on the building control, I believe.
Oh, thank you, Miss Wheatley.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, in terms of the building control audit action, the reason it's not achieved the deadline that we last stated is due to capacity issues. The building control team only consists of 2 individuals, and they've been very much hit by the COVID pandemic in terms of the additional workload. We are just in the process of securing a 3rd person to join the team. We interviewed this week, and we hope to appoint so that they can start from the beginning of May. So we are going to be having another deadline for the end of September, so that our senior specialists can document those procedures and we can achieve that deadline. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hurd, I believe you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think my question has partly been answered. Just looking at page 22, which is the recommendations overdue, it has crossed out December 20 and March 2021 in there. So I presume that will change now to September. but also in the body of the text, it says that the deadline for this audit action will need to be extended to 31/12/20, which I presume will be 21. If it isn't, I wondered why this was a high priority. It's been partially explained by Ms. Wheatley about the update delay. I would always like a little bit more detail rather than it's been delayed by COVID. I'd like to know what the reason for the delay was, and that has been partially answered. So my question is, have we got the dates right now, and can we just confirm which dates are true, please?
Miss Wheatley.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hurd. Yes, it really comes down to the fact that there's just the senior specialist who would be able to complete that action. Because of the fact that there were no site inspections done during the first lockdown, all of that work has backed up. So they've had a year's amount of work to complete in a 9-month period. Because there's 2 of them, they also have to cover for leave. One of them did actually have COVID in March last year as well, which also impacted. As I say, we've brought additional resource into the team now, who will hopefully be starting in May. So therefore, we do expect that will free up some capacity for our senior specialist to be able to document those procedures. So therefore, I've had a conversation with him. He has made a start on them, but just not got through as many of them as he'd like to. But he does assure me that the end of September this year is a realistic deadline to have those now achieved by.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd. Councillor Hurd. Are there any other questions before we move on? No?
Okay. I will move on then to the payroll report, which is page 25. So as you can see, this was a very positive report with substantial assurance provided. We reviewed starters, leavers, overtime, members' expenses and allowances for the period April to December 2020. We found two low findings regarding just having that documentation around payroll control reconciliations, just having the evidence that those have been signed off and prepared by 2 separate individuals, and also one low finding around just having like a new starter contract being signed and on file. But we didn't identify any significant weaknesses around the scope, which obviously was for that defined period of time, April to December 2020.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Councillor Nunn.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Can I take you, please, to page 28, Miss Donnelly? Are you okay?
Yes.
Thank you. At the bottom of the page, it says 2 leavers were paid the annual increase effective from April 2020, but this was not approved by the council until September 2020 after their leaving date.
Yes.
So just help me with this.
Yeah.
Is this the national pay award?
Yes, so this was 2 people who were eligible for that pay increase, and they left after the eligibility date, which was for the 1st of April. So say, I don't know the date to hand, but say, for example, they left in July, and those 2 people then were back paid the April to July before they left the increase that they were owed.
So a national pay award doesn't require council approval, does it?
I'm not sure on the details if it was just a pay increase, or I would need to go, maybe Chris also can provide a bit more information.
Mr. Leslie, would you like to come in and answer that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, it's a national pay award. The council is signed up to the NJC pay award, so we go with that. There obviously was a pay award of 2.75% last year. Those staff received their backdated pay, but they had left the council at the time, but they were entitled to that pay. So it's just a case of the pay uplift had come into effect, and it was announced obviously after the 1st of April, so it was announced after they had left So by the time they left, they were entitled to that pay, and it was paid. So it's not really an issue. It was just that they were entitled to that pay. They just happened to have received it after they left the council. So hopefully that's perhaps clear.
So can I come back, Chair, on that, please?
Yes,
so,
later.
Thank you. So I agree partly that it isn't an issue, in that people who are under NJC terms and conditions are entitled automatically to the pay award unless there's a performance concern and they've been given due notice that it should be withheld. So it's not really an audit issue, is it, that the council needed to approve the pay award, because the council doesn't need to approve the pay award. The issue here is that when somebody's left, if they've left and they're not on payroll, they need to make a claim for their back pay, and it's not paid automatically. So I find that that entry on page 28 very confusing.
Mr. Leslie?
Yes, yeah, I think you're right, Councillor Nunn. It's probably the word was not approved by the council until September 2020. I could assume that approved by the council means perhaps at an officer level in terms of the council as a whole approved the pay. But I think I take your point. It's looking like it wasn't properly approved, but indeed it was properly approved and everything was in order. And I think Ms Donnelly probably confirmed that there are no issues from their side and that everything was in order around that. Yeah, take your point.
Okay, thank you through you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Thank you, Ms Donnelly. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. Ms Donnelly, have you?
No, that was everything. Thanks, Chris, on that one. No, that was everything from my side, unless there's any further questions.
Okay, Councillor Stamp, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to back up what Councillor Nunn said, is that going to be amended, or is going to be a little note put on the report? Because I think it's a point well made, because it does read as though the council made the decision, not the officers. And I think that's important because minutes have to be an accurate, true reflection. And I would ask that that is minuted or amended somehow. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can we do that, Werner and Chris? Thank you. So recommendations that the committee considers comments and approves the 1 internal audit process report, March 21 at Appendix 1, 2 the follow-up of recommendations report March 2021 at Appendix 2, and 3 the payroll audit of February 2021 at Appendix 3 with that note for the payroll audit. Councillor Nunn, you had your hand up.
Sorry, you beat me to it, Chair. I was just going to say subject to that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. So can I have a seconder for that, for those motions, please?
Well, Councillor Nunn seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. Are members quite happy to take that as just
agreed?
Thank you.
By assent, Chairman. Agreed.
Thank you. By assent. I was looking for the word. Item number. Sorry, I'm lost now.
8, I think, Chairman.
Yeah, I've had a problem with my printer this morning, so I'm sort of working off of notes at the moment. Item 8, annual audit summary letter on the 21st on the 2019-20 external audit, found on pages 37 to 50. I call on Mr. Wilsden to present the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to everyone again. This is a very brief report from me. The report you have from us is, as you said, our annual audit letter. It's a document that essentially summarises all the audit reporting that I've done to this committee previously into a single sort of summary document that is then published on the Council's and PSAA website. So it's effectively like an executive summary to try and make the findings of my audit more accessible for members of the public. So because it's just a summary and there's nothing new in there, there's nothing new in terms of conclusions or findings or observations, Chair, I will take the document as read, and I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for Mr. Wilson on the letter? No. Do I have any officers that would like to comment? No. So recommendation is to consider and review the content of the letter. Do I have a seconder for that?
Chairman.
Yes, Jarvis, happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Channer. You've muted yourself, Councillor Channer.
Yes, I was just about to say I'm having a bit of trouble here, and that's answered it. I take it we can consider there was an appendices with the letter.
Yeah.
I take it we can ask a question, as my papers have totally now disappeared off my screen, and it was appendix 1.
Yeah, the appendix 1 is with the letter.
That's right. Letter to members and appendix 1. I was quite concerned about the valuations issue, and now something having to be raised as being significant. I wonder if you could just clarify that all a bit more, please, because there seemed to be something with valuations quite significant, and because of it, we needed to heighten the issue to being significant. I just would like some more information on that.
Valuations of money on page 47.
Yeah, and it's actually, there's a few comments actually. There's it mentions the misstatements as well, but here we are, the valuation of property assets 44.
All right.
And it says we identified a compensation error. It really starts on there. There's a whole sort of tranche of it all the way down.
Mm-hmm.
And it does mention about the requirement as something as significant.
Okay, Mr. Wilson, can you answer?
It's valuation of property assets 2, and it talks about we've had to elevate it to a significant risk because this was the second year in a row we've identified the material errors.
I'm happy to respond to that, if I may. And Councillor Channer, I mean, I suspect you possibly weren't in the meeting when we presented the final audit letter, because both myself and Officer Leslie went through the detail, which I'll briefly summarise now for your benefit. But at the last committee, so the committee has had sight of that. But in a nutshell, what it is you are required to hold certain assets on your balance sheet at fair value. And that means that they need to be valued by an independent valuer, and the council employs a valuer to do that. As part of our audit, we come in and check that. We use our own real estate specialists to sense check that. And we have found errors. We found an error in the 2019 audit as well as the 2020 audit. And because we had found errors in the valuation 2 years in a row, that from an audit perspective heightens the risk of error associated with that particular balance. So when that happens, we elevate it to what we call a significant risk. So that's an audit term that we use. When I elevate something to a significant audit risk, it means I basically do more work on it. So off the back of those errors, what we did do then is we extended the work that we did. We worked with the council and the valuer to understand what the cause of the issues were, and we also asked them to actually to essentially double check some of the historic valuations that had been done, which they did as well. So once we had completed all of our work, we were comfortable that there were no further material errors, and we were able to sign, or I was able to sign off on the audit's opinion. I'll summarise briefly the council's position, and Officer Leslie's welcome to contradict if I miss something out or say something wrong. But in response to the issues, the council is also, officers have also actively engaged with the valuer to find out why those issues happened. There have been discussions about them. I think there have been changes, certainly, in the way that the valuer is going to do it in their approach. So there has been further conversations between the council and the valuer to make sure that essentially this doesn't happen. This doesn't happen again. But as I say, Officer Leslie, I'm sure will add further narrative if needed.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Leslie, you've got your hand up, and I know you're desperate to come in and say something on this.
Thank you. Mr. Wisdom's obviously covered a lot of that, but I just want to add that what we did was obviously have those early discussions with our auditors and see how we can improve the process for next year, looking at the resourcing that they have as well. So we started the conversations very early. We've made sure we got the information that we needed early from them. So we've received valuations, draft valuations a couple of months ago, which is very timely, and we've been able to have a look at that this year and actually give good challenge around that. Now, obviously, we're not qualified valuers, but we can have a sense check, we can look at it, and we can check the work they've done. And we've gone back to them with questions and being able to have a robust process around there for checking with the valuers this year. So that's the sort of steps that we've taken, have the discussions, early meetings, and more robust checks of the information that comes back.
Chairman, may I come back?
Yes, I will allow you to come back to Councillor Channer.
Thank you. I'm not quite clear what was the cause. Has been mentioned, obviously checking what the causes was. It seems that the DVS's quality control procedures didn't pick up certain things, but it also clears that there's been a lack of a review of property valuation and valuation inputs. So I'm not quite clear on the cause which has led to this.
Mr. Leslie?
And how this has been corrected. I'm not quite clear of what actions have been put in place to remove or mitigate this occurring.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Channer. Mr. Leslie?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the errors occurred, the initial 2 errors in the 2 years occurred from I would say human error in terms of the valuations that we received from that in both years. Obviously, since then, we've had conversations around actually the resourcing that takes place within there, and do we need to look at that? So that's been put in place. We also had conversations with them around the quality checking procedures as well that takes place. So they've looked to improve that themselves internally around the resources they provide and how they check stuff before it gets sent to us. And then in addition to that, we've looked at our own internal controls and looked at making sure we get that information early, engaging with them and actually reviewing in a more robust way what they submit to us and go back with challenge, which we have done. So
thank you. If you don't mind it, Councillor Channer, was that it? Because then I can move on to someone else.
Well, I suppose one final question. We're confident then going forward this is rectified, I guess, as much as it can be.
Yeah, I think we've done everything possible, and I would point out that technically the valuations, and we did have a discussion with the external auditors as well, that actually so the technical aspects of the valuations have been good. It's only been a case of some of this human errors that have come in, so I've looked at addressing that. So I think we have confidence in the underlying technical abilities there, but we feel we've done everything possible to address this issue going forward. As I said, they've looked at their processes, they've looked at resourcing, we're looking at challenging, we've got things in early. So I think we've done everything that I can see possible, or reasonable at the very least.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hurd's hand up, and then I had Councillor Stamp and Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking at page 48, which is the analysis of audit fees. And I note that there is an additional fee due to change of scope due to COVID and asset valuation errors. Well, we've spoken about the asset valuation errors. I'm afraid it's the same old chestnut with me due to COVID. What difference has COVID made, and what change of scope has almost given rise to 50% on the charges of the fees, please?
Thank you. Mr. Wilson?
Yes, thank you. So well, there's two things. First of all, we on the fees, we have provided a detailed analysis to Officer Leslie, and indeed had it's been part of the discussions and challenge that Councillor Jarvis has put to us as well. So specifically to COVID, and apologies for bundling it under a single umbrella, but there are multiple elements to it. So as part of our audit, well, our audit is for example a risk-based audit, and what that means is that we do an initial assessment of whether individual balances, what the inherent risk of error on an individual balances. Now, when COVID came along, that changed the inherent risk associated with a number of balances. It made that risk higher. So, for example, COVID meant that people had to work remotely. They had to work from home, not just at the council, but with your suppliers and others. So the reason I come along and think that the risk is heightened now is because when I look at it, I think that there is an increased inherent risk that, for example, somebody working from home might not follow the same procedures as they would have within the office. I also think that there may be delays in you receiving information from your suppliers because they're falling behind because of inefficiencies with remote working, etc. So I'm just giving this as an example of one example, but there are a number. So as a result of that increased inherent risk, it meant that I had to do additional procedures within my audit to cover off that risk, or to satisfy myself that increase in inherent risk had not resulted in an error within the accounts. So I've given you one example, and again, as I say, I'm happy to provide further. We've had the discussions and the analysis with officers, but there are a range of different areas that did that. So that is COVID, and as I say, there's multiple areas, but COVID is the wrong banner. It's extra auditing as a result of the impact that COVID had on a variety of different areas.
Councillor Hurd, I will let you come back.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It is directly on that. Can we just be assured that those additional fees were authorised by the finance, by Mr. Leslie and his staff, as opposed to something that's just being looked at, please?
Thank you, Mr. Leslie.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah. So ultimately, I suppose this goes back to the point that the PSAA will have the final say on the fees, and they're looking at that at the moment. In terms of the fees, we've discussed that with the external auditors and feel that they are reasonable in terms of that. But of course, it's down to the PSAA to make the final judgment, and they will look at that as well and assess what they deem reasonable.
OK, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp, you had your hand up.
I'm going to give a quick question based on what Councillor Hurst just said. I'm going to give way to Councillor Jarvis because he was before me. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Hurd, I think he was actually saying the way my mind worked there, it wasn't like a blank cheque. Was the auditor, Craig Wisdom, actually going to you, Mr. Leslie, before he was carrying out the additional work? Was there a risk assessment, a financial risk assessment to this council to say that the fees were going to be higher? Because it should all be pre-approved before somebody just coming in and saying, well, I'm going to have to do this. So was there a dialogue, and were you happy as a director that they, no disrespect, 'cause I know you're sitting in the Zoom meeting, Mr. Wisdom, but are you happy that we have had value for money, Mr. Leslie? Thank you.
Mr. Leslie.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the fees also went to a committee as well back in at least in September time as well, with the 2021 fees as well. So the committee have had sight of those and they've remained unchanged from the one that the committee saw. I think, as I said before, the external auditors worked very well with the external auditors, very pleased with how they've done. We've worked together to get the accounts signed off. So from my perspective, we've had good value for money from our auditors. Obviously, it's a shame that we have to pay more, and I accept that. But at the same time, I understand that they do need to do more work around that side of it, and they have obviously informed us with their letters, etc. So I'm satisfied from my point of view.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, you've been patiently there with your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I was just initially, I think my hand was up with regards to Councillor Channer's point, but if I may come back on Councillor Channer's and Councillor Hurd's points. I mean, the issue of asset valuation was a concern. We did discuss it in detail in November, so we have had the conversation on it before. As Craig Wisdom quite rightly said, his report today is a summary of not new points, but points which have been raised and debated before. But obviously worth going through anything which, if somebody hasn't sort of picked up on it. But we have discussed that before. The £9,000 associated with the asset valuation. This was the second year that there was a failing, mainly a failing with an external body, but of course that should have been picked up on and shouldn't have occurred. And we've heard that Chris Leslie quite rightly has says he's addressed that issue both with internal procedure and also what the external body do in terms of their performance. You'll see that £9,000, which is in an expense for the last audit. I mean, that hasn't actually yet been agreed, I have to say. Both that and the COVID 7,700 on the schedule that Chris Leslie distributed. Those two numbers are essentially up for the PSSA to determine whether they are reasonable or not. It has to be said, though, that as a council, we have said that based on our examination of what occurred and based on records, etc., that we're happy to support those fees for the last audit year. So I think, so as I say, so some of that discussion has taken place before. We have seen those figures before. And I think Chris Leslie and Craig Weston have reiterated things have been done internally so that to the best of our knowledge, that won't occur again. So I think that's good. As far as the other point is concerned on COVID, the sort of 7,700. Yeah, there is 7,700 in last year. Again, that is an item which is for the PSSA to determine, and they've got it in front of them at the moment to do that. As far as that figure being in again for next year, I mean, that's very much just in there as a sort of budget number. None of the numbers other than the scale fee essentially are pre-approved by council. You know, they go in as where we think the estimate might be, or where Craig Wisdom thinks the estimate might be. We can chip that down, which is what we've done. And those numbers, which currently essentially add up to 88,000, less obviously the currently 88,000. That's what sort of will ultimately go to PSSA if that's what eventually comes in on the bill. That's 7,700 for COVID is Craig Wisdom's estimate of what the figure might be. So ultimately what will happen is they'll do the audit and that figure, maybe that amount, it might be a much smaller amount, we hope. But in any case, whatever it is, all of those numbers, bar the scale fee, get reviewed by PSAA. And we also get the opportunity to say whether we're happy to support the numbers that have gone in or not. We currently are supporting the numbers for last year. Currently, we're saying that we're not supporting the substantial increases for this year. So it would be wrong for councillors to think that we've just sort of rolled over and agreed a reduced budget. We've got a reduced budget, but we're specifically at the moment saying to PSAA, actually, we don't agree with those numbers. Of course we don't. They're twice as much as the scale fee and quite a lot more than last year. And it will be up to them then to have a discussion and work out PSAA whether that's reasonable or not based on filing inspection or not. So I just wanted to sort of give a little bit of detail there to the process going on. I think Chris Leslie's got it very much under control. I think Craig Wisdom knows exactly where he is on the matter. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jarvis. Councillor Channer, you have your hand up.
I have actually, Chairman, yes. I appreciate discussions may have been taking place before, but I'm sorry, Chairman, perhaps I might have not quite caught on with the situation, the gravity of it that I now consider I have on having it come round, if you like, second time again. And I think as a member, I am entitled to ask those questions at the point I might feel I need further questioning and answers to find myself content. I rather like the £100,000, where, if you recall, and it wasn't just me alone, I think several members hadn't quite appreciated the doubling of the audit fees that was then sort of reported. And it was sort of said, oh, well, this was in the letter, da-da-da-da-da. And I, you know, whatever the letter was, I still don't know that it was quite clear. £100,000 was the perhaps intended increase. And in fact, then we had a summary at the last meeting of Mr. Leslie sort of doing a verbal quick update at the previous meeting of Audit. So I do apologise if I might appear slow to some people coming in on these matters, but I will always ask questions if I do find myself having to go over something and not thoroughly understanding it, Madam Chairman. And I think that's perfectly acceptable within the confines of this committee. So I just wanted to make those points. I think members need to speak up if they feel there's something that's now come to their registration much more acutely and sort of get answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miss Councillor Channer. Of course, we've tried to keep the members updated with everything that's gone on, and as Councillor Leslie said, Mr. Leslie said, and Councillor Jarvis, we have had more talks to try and bring the number down because none of us were happy with that 100,000. And as you're right, this is the place where we should discuss these things and we should ask these questions.
I suppose, Madam Chairman, I was feeling a bit like a naughty schoolgirl. People telling me we've had these discussions before, as though my brain should have taken it all on and been absolutely clear. Yes. And, I do feel that if my brain wasn't clear, which it obviously wasn't, that's why I felt I needed to ask further questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Channer. As any other questions on this annual audit letter, summary letter? No. So if councillors are happy with that, can I have a seconder for the recommendation, which was to consider and review the content of the letter?
Happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Jarvis. And do members wish to agree this by assent?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. We will move on to item 9 on your agenda, which is the staff survey headline results. These are found on page 51 to 56, and I call on Miss Hughes to present the item.
Good afternoon, members. This report is presented to the committee as an update on the recent staff survey, which ran between September and November 2020. This is the second year that we've run the survey internally, which allows us also to now benchmark year on year. You will see in section 3.2 of the report that we received a good response rate of 72% of staff, and overall the responses to the survey show a positive increase in staff satisfaction between 2019 and 2020. We included additional questions this year around the impact of COVID on our staff and preferences for future ways of working, and these have also been fed into associated work streams. Section 3.3 shows areas where staff satisfaction had increased and also where it was at its lowest. In response to this, the extended leadership team met in January to review the full results and feedback and identify an action plan to address some of the staff concerns. The action plan is attached to Appendix A to give members reassurance that staff feedback is being addressed through these high-level actions. Behind this action plan, there are detailed action plans and areas of responsibility that have been identified so that we can implement it operationally. The communications team and the internal One Team champions have also been turning the plan into a format of You Said We Did, which will be launched shortly to staff. Members are invited to review and comment on the information set out through this update and confirm assurance that the staff feedback is being managed effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Councillor Hurd, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I just want to confirm that we've got the dates right, because I've got here that this was areas of. First of all, I'm glad to see that there were some good areas of satisfaction, and I note that this was actually prior to the administration up to the 1st of November 2020. But the low areas of satisfaction, which is of course what we're being asked to look at, talk about insufficient resources, low satisfaction on MDC's future vision, and low satisfaction on career development. Now, there was a workshop run, I think it says January 2020. Is that meant to be January 2021? So I'll pause there, because if it's January 20, I've got another point. So could Miss Hughes confirm the date of the workshop?
Miss Hughes?
Sorry, which workshop are you? Which point in the reports are you referring to?
3.6. The management team held a workshop in January 2020.
Oh, sorry, that should say 2021. You're right. That's just an error in the typing. So that's
Okay.
the workshop that I was referring to, where the action plans come from.
Right. Okay, that's fine. So because obviously that would have been pre-lockdown and not really relevant to what we were doing. So if we're looking at these three areas of low satisfaction, the question is, did Ignite get it wrong? That's my question, Chairman.
Miss Hughes, do you want to come back?
Chairman, I don't think that's a fair question to ask. I'm sorry, and it's especially under PERDA. I'm sorry, Councillor Hurd. I don't normally jump in and stop freedom of discussion and speeches and everything, but I don't think it's fair to ask an officer that question. It's happened. We have to adhere and move forward to it. Sorry, Councillor Hurd. I hope you don't think I'm being a little bit unfair. But I do.
I'm happy to rephrase the question. Are we happy that we are able to address these three areas as a result of the workshop?
So the action plan attached as the appendices for things like increasing workload and pressure. One of the actions is that we are actually breaking down, which areas staff feedback, because given the time, some of that, I know it's your least favourite thing, but some of that will be related to COVID pressures as well, where people were doing extra processes on top of their normal day job. So we're trying to work out and attribute those staff pressures to COVID or just their normal day-to-day role as well. So we're doing some work on that, and we do think that will help us to identify where some things might be to do with organisational look, and then some things might be to do with just the pressure of COVID as well.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Can I just say, nothing to do with PERDA. I just wanted to make sure that we've got the numbers right. That's all I'm after. Thank you.
Miss Wheatley, you wanted to come and say something before I move on to another councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to also make the point that we have actually brought some additional resources in. They weren't in situ at the time that the survey was completed, but within service delivery, we've appointed, I think off the top of my head, about another 8 roles across the teams. So that has relieved some of the pressure. But of course, at the time the survey was completed, we hadn't appointed into those additional vacancies. So we are in a much better position now, but we will continue working on those points that were raised through the survey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nunn, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, I've found over the years that staff surveys are really important, but it's equally important that they're read in context. And, we are living through unprecedented times. Whether we like it or not, COVID does have an impact on staff motivation and morale, and of course new ways of working. So I'm not surprised that the results are coming out in some respects in the way that they are, but the action plan needs to be read in context by reading the full report, because the full report gives the bigger picture, the bigger story. And what's really important coming out of this is the action plan. It's great to see that well-being is up, and I think that's a credit to management. I'm not talking about members, I'm talking about officers. This is a credit to the senior management team that they have taken care of their staff during these unprecedented times. So it's good that well-being's up. Development and direction seem to be down. But actually, when you look at the report, unless I've misread the report, the highest negatives, if that makes sense, are low. The highest negatives are low. The highest negatives are between 18 and 28%. The highest positives are high. in that they're between 91 and 94%. So you actually can almost work that out to the numbers of staff that have said the things they've said. Now, again, without me talking out of turn, there are always staff who have particular views, either in a rosy way or a non-rosy way. And then you get people in the middle that sort of just have views. So I just think we need to take that, all of that into account. And what I would ask, Madam Chairman, is that through you, whether the officers feel that it would be useful for this committee to monitor implementation of the action plan in terms of what's happened and the impact that action plan has had. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. I think that would be a good idea. Mr. Dobson, I know you're on this call. Are you happy with Councillor Nunn's suggestion that we monitor this?
Yes, we'd be happy to bring back a further report on progress with this. As we've shown, there's a clear action plan in place. Much of the information will be through the balance scorecard. In any case, some of the staffing information comes through that, and the final results of the changes will be through the only known really when we do the survey next year to have the comparable results. But more than happy to bring back a report updating on the actions that we've outlined and the you said we did approach to what we've taken generally to be a very positive staff survey. I think the responses have generally been positive. You're obviously going to get positives and negatives within any survey, but the responses showed a big improvement from previous years, I think, and we've been able to put in a clear plan that shows that we can address those issues. So a really positive process, I think, and yes, happy to report back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dobson. I had Councillor Stamp and then Councillor Channer's hand up. So if I go to Councillor Stamp next.
Thank you, Chair. No, I think it was a great report. I was really, really happy when obviously the areas of concern was that some officers and some staff were working harder and felt they couldn't cope. And I think the directors and the senior leadership team was well aware of that. As well, we know when we've had meetings, all members have raised awareness and concerns to make sure there's a work-life balance. And I know one particular councillor, and I won't mention any names because I don't want to be in trouble, has always said that they were concerned and should be turning their phone off. And that member is actually here, sitting here, most probably grinning at the moment, and knows I'm referring to her. So it's really vitally important that the directors do still keep on top of sometimes the overloading of certain staff. But Ms Wheatley is completely right. They have introduced and employed new staff, and I think there will be a better work-life and home life balance. But we also must appreciate that having to work from home has its benefits as well as its drawbacks. But I was actually heartened to read this report and for the honesty of the staff, because it's not always easy to turn around and fill a form in or a survey if you're feeling a little bit, you know, overstretched on pressure. And COVID has, but not just this authority, everywhere, put additional stress on workers, directors and members. And I just think it's very well done. And I welcome Mr. Councillor Nunn to actually ask for it to have a follow-up on that. I think it's vital we keep an eye on the staff because the pandemic isn't over and we still need to keep it at this high level. So no questions, it's just a comment, and thank you very much. And a good report. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Channer.
Thank you. Well, I'm not being critical of the report, and I agree with much has been said. I can't even get my teeth in straight these days. And Councillor Nunn's had the benefit of being able to read the detailed report, which unfortunately I haven't because I can't access it like you, Madam Chairman. So the areas that did actually just concern me, or that's been explained to a degree, and it is actually to do with the staff development and training. And I appreciate we have had COVID, and obviously it's changed the way we all work and everything, and all online. Can I just inquire though, it is important, and I see objectives has been referred to, that actually that every officer does recognise how important their role is in the authority, regardless whether they're top of the tree or at the bottom of it. And equally important that they perhaps do understand how their role is that very important cog in the wheel that turns. And, you know, one cog missing can affect the whole movement of a wheel. And therefore, regarding objectives, can I be given some assurance that we still do go through the process of the personal development plans? It might be when the appraisals are done, and that would give an indication of when the training is. But do we make staff recognise the importance of them and help them? I'm sure they do know anyway, but maybe to know how their objectives do actually fall into the big picture. Without their objectives, actually, the big strategic outcomes wouldn't be possible. So I suppose my question is, have we been able to maintain, to a degree, staff appraisals, personal development plans, which would actually place a record on files for each and every individual, you know, precious officer we've got, to ensure they perhaps do recognise they will get training? I just felt to say we were going to have put together an all-staff annual training timetable. I was thinking, how does that apply to the individuals? Because the individuals are very, very important, and every individual needs to feel valued and also recognise how important their particular role is within the machine, for want of a better word, or the wheel turning. So I just would like sort of a bit of background on that, if I may. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. I had Miss Wheatley's and Mr. Dobson's hands go up at exactly the same time. So which one of you would like to respond first? Mr. Dobson? Or
Thank you. Perhaps I could give an overview, and then Mrs. Wheatley can provide some of the background on the actions in that particular area. I think we really value the performance management process, and we make sure, you know, in terms of addressing all of these issues, we've just had approval from council for the updated corporate plan, and it's really important that we have that, not least in addressing some of the issues that were within the survey around the need for clear vision and direction, which I think again was a fair comment, having been through, it was 2 years since the publication of the original plan, and then we'd been through COVID as well, so things had changed. But I mention that because really it's about that golden thread that flows from the corporate plan through service plans, through everyone's smart objectives, and into the jobs they do. So that, as Councillor Channer absolutely rightly says, everybody is vital in delivering everything that we do throughout the whole organisation. And if there's a problem in one area, then it can have a major issue. So we do go through that process. We have set the SMART objectives annually, and we made sure that those were kept up through the start of last year, through the pandemic. That does include making sure there's reference to all of the corporate plan, the service plan, and the training needs that people have within those, to make sure that we summarise those, understand them, and they will obviously inform the training plan that's referred to within the actions. So yes, we definitely have all of that in place, and looking this year to ensure as well that we embed the corporate values that are in the new corporate plan through that SMART setting objectives as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Wheatley.
Yes, thank you. So just building on what Mr. Dodson said, we do have regular one-to-ones. The one-to-ones take place with every officer every 6 to 8 weeks. And in those one-to-ones, we do use that opportunity to discuss their mental health, to discuss those development opportunities. And we are in the process of setting objectives for the next financial year. There have been challenges with training remotely, but we have been doing training over the last 12 months via Teams. But we would very much look forward to doing that face-to-face when we're able to kind of go back to the office and use the rooms to be able to do training and team meetings, because there are some challenges that come with doing it remotely. But that being said, the feedback that we've had from officers that have been trained remotely is still very positive. And in reference to the additional roles that we've created, a number of internal staff have had the opportunity to actually progress and develop their careers. So there's also been that opportunity for career progression, and we do very much recognise the strengths and the abilities that our officers have and look to enable them to develop and progress within the authority in terms of that career development. So that focus has very much been there over the last 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Channer, you did have your hand up. Did you want to come back?
Down now. Is it not down your end? Looks
No,
like
no,
it's down
you've
mine.
just taken it down, but I wondered if you still wanted to come back on something.
No, I think
Thank you. So if everybody's happy with that, we'll move to the recommendations, which is that the committee review and comment on the staff survey results and the associated action plan, which you've all done, and that members confirm through this that they are assured that the staff survey response is being managed effectively. So if any member wishes to second that motion, please turn your mic on.
None seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. Are members happy to agree by assent?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 10, any other item on the business on the agenda? The only thing I will say is that this is the very last meeting before the statutory annual for PG&A, and I would like to thank every officer and every committee member for all the support and help that you've given me throughout this time as chair. So thank you for that. So item on the 11 on the agenda is the closure of meeting. Thank you for your contributions this afternoon. I draw the meeting to a close at 15:06 p.m. As members leave the meeting, you are advised not to enter into any further discussion on this forum. And can you leave promptly? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Bye.